Hello there, my name is Sergeant Wesley Williams. I'm a very proud member of the Oklahoma Army National Guard. I'd like to take this opportunity to share with you some of our history. Our story begins on December 13, 1636. Long before our nation was known as the United States, the Massachusetts Bay Colony needed protection, and several men volunteered and mustered up later on that spring for the very first time. There were 3 large regiments. These men gathered weapons and were instrumental in the protection of the citizens. Now we can fast forward on to the American Revolution, where our fighters could be found in all the former colonies. These state militias proved necessary to help General George Washington secure an American victory. Throughout that war, militia units were mobilized when British forces entered their areas, and they participated in most of the battles fought. It was during this war that the Minuteman was needed. This meaning that just ordinary citizens were going to be able and ready to take up arms in just a moment's notice, particularly 1 minute's time. The point of readiness we still use today in our battle drills. The early United States distrusted a large standing army, and they kept the number of professional soldiers quite small. There were actually 19 Guard militias credited for serving in the War of 1812. We had a French General Lafayette visiting the U.S. in 1824 and 1825. The 2nd Battalion, 11th New York Artillery, was one of the many militia commands who turned out in his welcome. This unit adopted the title National Guard in honor of Lafayette's French National Guard. Guard-type units provided about 70% of the soldiers that fought in the Mexican-American War, and we also provided the majority of soldiers in the Spanish War. We had several people there in the Civil War as well. Between 1864 and 1895, the militias of the state of Colorado and the territories of New Mexico, Arizona, and Oklahoma here grew more organized. These militias would eventually organize into the units that we see make up today's 45th Infantry. The Oklahoma Territory recorded its first unit in the year 1890. The National Defense Act passed later in 1916. This law formally created the Guard as a reserve component of the U.S. Army, and just 15 days later the Oklahoma Guard was called into federal service down along the Mexican border. The 1st Oklahoma Infantry was later mobilized for service in World War I. The 1st Oklahoma combined with the 7th Texas Infantry to form the 142nd Regiment. These Guardsmen arrived in France in July 1918, and by October they served around the Blanc-Mont Ridge in the Fern Forest. The 142nd Regiment was part of the capture of Saint-Étienne on October 9, 1918. One of the more significant contributions was the origin of the Native American Code Talkers. The 142nd had a company who spoke 26 languages and dialects. 2 tribal officers were selected to supervise a communication system staffed by 18 Choctaw members. The team transmitted messages relating to troop movements and their own tactical plans in their native tongue. Soldiers from other tribes, including the Cheyenne, Comanche, Cherokee, Osage, and Yankton Sioux, were also enlisted to communicate as code talkers. Smaller units, several of which would be formed today's 700th Support Battalion, became part of the Rainbow or 42nd Infantry Division, and these fighters went on to the 90th Texas Oklahoma Infantry Division for World War I. Following in World War II, the 45th Infantry Division was activated in 1940 and sent to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Then later on they moved to Camp Barkley, Texas, where the unit was enlarged and then divided up. The 158th Regiment served in the Panama Canal Zone and in the Southwest Pacific Theater. Another battalion deployed to Alaska to help build the Alcan Highway and participate in the invasion of Okinawa. The remaining components of the 45th Division were sent to Sicily in 1943, where they fought in the campaigns of Naples, Foggia, Rome, Arno, southern France, Rhineland, and Central Europe. On April 29, 1945, the 45th liberated Dachau, the first concentration camp established by Germany's evil Nazi regime. A major Dachau subcamp was also liberated on that same day by the 42nd Rainbow. Very highly revered General George S. Patton called the 45th, and I quote, one of the best, if not the best division in the history of American arms. During World War II, the 45th Division fought in 511 days of combat. 9 of our soldiers were awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. Moving along to the early 1950s, the 45th once again saw combat, as they were the first National Guard unit to be called for service in that conflict. Several 120th Engineer units were located there as well. As Chinese forces continued to mount concentrated attacks on the front lines of the UN forces, our division, the 45th, managed to hold most of its ground, remaining stationary until the end of the war in 1953. One soldier received the Medal of Honor in that conflict. The 45th Division was awarded 4 campaign streamers and 1 presidential unit citation. The Guard has been used many times on the home front by states' governors. In 1973, the Oklahoma Guard was used to end one of the worst prison riots in the history of our country at the McAlester, Oklahoma State Penitentiary. In April 1995 brought an unthinkable tragedy as Oklahoma City suffered the worst act of domestic terrorism to date with the Murrah Federal Building bombing. Immediately, additional assistance came from 465 members of the Oklahoma National Guard within 1 hour to provide security, and from also members of the Department of Civil Emergency Management. The National Guard was there once again to respond to recovery from the May 3, 1999 tornado outbreak, with the largest response area being around the Moore, Oklahoma area. The first member of the United States military to know that something was wrong on the morning of September 11, 2001 was a member of the New York National Guard on duty at an air defense headquarters. By the end of the day, more than 8,000 members of the Army National Guard had been mobilized by the Governor of New York. The National Guard continued to assist in recovery operations at Ground Zero that transitioned into a security augmentation duty that continues on to this day. In the global war on terror that followed, many Guard units deployed to the Middle East along with the active components. The achievements in Afghanistan and Iraq by Oklahomans will not be forgotten. There has been countless deployments to this theater of operations. In 2005, several states responded to New Orleans and the Gulf Coast due to Hurricane Katrina. By the end of September, the Guard had flown over 10,200 missions, airlifted over 88,000 passengers to safety, and moved over 18,000 tons of supplies and relief aid that saved over 17,000 lives. The Oklahoma National Guard sheltered many survivors at the Camp Gruber Training Center in eastern Oklahoma. In May 2013, the Guard returned to Moore to protect property and assist in disaster recovery as another devastating tornado took precious life and caused many injuries. Just a few years ago, in 2017, the Oklahoma Guard was activated and sent down to Houston to assist Texas's National Guard for Hurricane Harvey flooding and further relief efforts. The engineers were utilized to protect green country communities from severe flooding in spring 2019. Many sandbags and other levee support was utilized. And now today we are once again called upon to support our communities during the current circumstances that overtake this country. And once again, we are always ready, always there.